If you're like me, and you got no life and there's nowhere to go, then tune in to the Animation Truman Show. You'll be glad you did.
And you will be absolutely thrilled that you tuned in tonight to the Animation Truman Show. However, I do need to look and make sure that my live stream is in fact public, because as I've related a couple other times, it looks like it is. So hopefully somebody will show up tonight. Well, what are we doing? Don't know that I'll be doing a super long live stream tonight, but I do have a couple kind of interesting things to talk about. What I'm doing actually right now is fix-ups, and it's going quite well, I must say. There's been, in the last couple days, I've blitzkrieged through the next webisode, which would be webisode 4, and believe it or not, as we look at the animation, kind of scroll through here, things are looking pretty good, and I would say, I can't make any, I mean, this one was completely redone in terms of the characterization. So I can't say for sure it's going to be like, 2 weeks or something, but I think, hey Tom, I do think it's going to be quicker. It's getting quicker. They're all getting quicker. And so, just a little while ago, before I started live streaming, I was working on these shots of Tianara where her, basically like around her eyes, I need to give her a little makeup, basically. A little bit more, little more eyelash. So she looks a bit more feminine. I also punched up that shot right there where his face was, showed that a couple nights ago, that his face was getting kind of distorted a little bit by the liquify tool, so we fixed that. So I'm going to continue tonight with some fix-ups, and certainly that shot of Golik is a, I'm actually going to remove the color correction from this shot because there's no point. It's, this shot is a travesty, friends. It's a travesty. Golik is so off character that I should be ashamed of myself for even allowing it into the show. So, although it may make sense, I must say, as well, tonight, yeah, we'll see how far we get, but jumping forward to this stuff with Tianara might not be bad, since this is what I've been working on today, and I'm kind of in the Tianara zone. Although, to be fair, these shots look pretty good, with the possible caveat that maybe the same thing where we give her just a little bit more makeup around the eyes. So, at that rate, let's just keep looking here. Then we'll get into a couple other things. Yeah, there's some definite characterization issues there with Mel that I think could use some work. Yeah, that's not working. And we need backgrounds there, don't we? So, I would say it's going pretty well, pretty quick, and this whole sequence is pretty much okay. I may defocus the background, but yeah, so in terms of animation fix-ups, we're pretty well on track. So, what else? Well, I had mentioned in a post today, a community post. Let me see what we got here. This book and its author. So, I don't know if you guys have heard of this book. I had heard of it. I haven't read it yet, but I'm sipping my martini. But I had heard of the book, and I'm planning to get a copy so I can read it, because it's kind of weird. As you guys know, I've been woefully negligent about promoting Salt and Light and doing kind of all the sort of marketing funnel things that people do that, frankly, Darren T is doing a much better job than me. Was sort of dialing in and tooling up the, your Patreons and your sponsorships and, all the things that people do, favoring instead just a focus on cranking out a show. And my reason for that is that I've kind of felt all along that it would be better, at least for me, my path is to get these webisodes out there and maybe get a little bit of traction on the street for the show, maybe a little interest in it, blah, blah, blah. And then as that starts to ramp a little bit, now I've kind of shown I can deliver a product, yada, yada, yada. I can go ahead and maybe start to talk about it a little bit more. So with that in mind, to tell you the truth, this is what happened. I just thought, okay, I might as well start talking about it, right? I got three webisodes out there, and we're on a track where this is going to continue, and it's not going to be long before I'm going to be able to have a complete 24-minute show that I can funnel on over to film distribution and then get going on, episode 2, which likewise I expect. I don't promise, but I think my expectation is that that's going to also be released as a sequence of 4-ish minute episodes, webisodes as it were, here on YouTube in the same way. So anyway, with that in mind, I kind of just do a random Google search, and I'm just kind of looking for, I don't even remember what I searched, but it was something that had to do with animation, portals or places that, maybe publications or whatever that just kind of talk about cartoons, where this idea of like one guy trying to create an entire anime type show all by himself, it's kind of an interesting thing, maybe that's interesting. So, and in the process of doing that, I wind up coming across, I don't even know how I did it, but I came across some blog entry by Ed Hooks. Okay, so let me show you his website. I think he's got it I believe it's edhooks.com. Let's see. Yeah, right here we go. So this is Ed.
Hello, I'm Ed Hooks, acting for animators. Welcome, I'm your acting teacher. Scroll down and explore the ways that we can work together.
Okay, so there's Ed, and his book has some real street cred. I mean, there's a glowing review of the book in the book by Brad Bird, who is probably some of you guys know is the director of The Incredibles, the Pixar film, and as well as The Iron Giant. So Ed's definitely got some pretty darn good street cred out there. But anyway, it was really interesting because I just reached out to Ed, and he and I wound up having some pretty lengthy email. He does have a cartoon face, Tom, you're right. But we just had a pretty lengthy dialogue back and forth, and he was kind of taking an interest, not in just what I'm doing here, but also my work as an independent filmmaker, and kind of what you have to deal with actors on the set. Sometimes dealing with actors who, in a low budget scenario, are of marginal ability, maybe compared to a professional, who's doing it full time kind of thing. And there's certain things that I've learned to do in that regard. And we'll go ahead and kill this. Such as, for example, my cast would make fun of me for, I remember, in like a rap party or something, they would yell at me, let it breathe, because I would always be saying to them in their performances, let it breathe, because a lot of the times the problems that less experienced actors have is they're too what I call flowy. Okay, they never stop moving, and so the audience doesn't have that moment to digest whatever it is that they want him to that you want them to see or understand in the storytelling. And so I would talk to actors about thinking about their performance as what I call a one-dimensional sequence. So you break the thing into a sequence where you're very clearly specific about what you're doing in what order, and you're making sure that you give it beats and in many cases a rhythm, which actually makes it easier to remember the sequence if it's a rhythm, because you kind of learn it almost like you learn a song. But anyway, so I'm going back and forth with Ed, and we're just finding we kind of see the world the same way, in terms of how we look at acting and blah 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 blah. And so the upshot is that he agreed to avail himself for an interview, and I don't know when that's going to come, but I think it's something that really should be of interest to you guys, because what I expect we're going to talk about, I sort of have to dial in my agenda in terms of the kind of questions I want to ask, but it's really with his experience in the animation space, the things that I'm thinking of. And by the way, I would even solicit you guys actually, and you know, hop on the Discord, maybe in the general discussion or something, and weigh in with things about how a mature or professional approach to acting might inform what you do with animation, or putting it another way, the things that I think of are things like this, like when you're, especially when you're a less experienced animator and you're trying to learn, I wonder if there's things that you could learn about acting that would actually help you to make fewer mistakes in your path learning to be a good animator, because at the end of the day, this is all about storytelling, right? So if somebody who's, and I've said this before obviously, but somebody who's really fixated on Disney style animation, you know, for lack of a better term, you know, like A and B animation, the kind of content you'll get there, it's all good, but the focus there is really on this, you know, that type of animation as a thing unto itself. Whereas for me, I'm a pragmatic animator who all I really care about is the characters and the emotion and telling the story, whatever it takes to do that. So what's interesting to me is how the economics of animation, especially in the anime space and also in the television industry in the 50s and 60s, informed what you could do with the animation, because you really didn't have the budget to do what you could do, you know, if you're the Disney studios, right? And as a result, that sort of more limited approach became an aesthetic of its own. And now we see it in America, obviously, in shows like, you know, Family Guy or whatever, where there really isn't very much animation going on most of the time. So it's a fairly economical type of production, but yet it's absolutely obviously proven to be enormously entertaining for people. And that's really all that matters at the end of the day, in my opinion. So anyway, I'm going to be thinking about the kinds of questions I want to ask Ed as it pertains to acting for animators, and then obviously plug his book. You know, I'm sure it's a great read. Just from talking to him, I got to say, I'm really sure it's a good book. You know, so apparently he's furiously working on the new edition right now, and it won't be coming out for like a year, but that's kind of what he's doing. So I thought you guys might find that interesting, and I think it'd be fun here on the channel to, you know, finally do more of that type of thing where I'm interviewing people who maybe are, you know, a lot smarter than me about certain aspects of the animation process or industry. So anyway, I'll let you guys know as soon as we have something scheduled. I'll let you know, and I expect that's going to be a pretty cool and fun thing to do. So anyway, that's that. So as far as Salt and Light goes, what are we doing? Well, I just did shot number 289, or did I just open 289? Let me look at this. Yes, this was a reversal of 287, and then she has her little scowl. So I got to check the show. I think what I'll do is turn on the full screen preview and see if I rendered that, because I'm not sure I rendered that shot. So that would be somewhere in here. So let's just do a quick recap. But, you know, I got to say, in our email exchange, the thing Ed said that I found the most baffling, but I take him at his word, is that he, again, this blows my mind, because here's a guy who's pretty tuned into what's going on in the animation industry, and he says he's not aware of anybody else on the planet that's doing what I'm trying to do here. You know, in terms of one guy creating a relatively, hopefully, credible show. So there it is. Okay, so it looks like I did render that, and so we can keep moving forward here. Yeah, there's the skull. So now I guess I need to think about this shot. We changed angles. I don't know what I was thinking here, because really in terms of storytelling, I see what I did. In terms of storytelling, it seems like this should be flipped. right? Because she's kind of facing this way. But maybe not. Maybe not, actually. Editorially speaking, it does make sense that we're kind of looking down on her here, and we established the layout here in terms of where she is relative to the building, and so the idea here was that the camera's coming around and shooting her, as it were, from the perspective of the building, such that then we go to this focus pull shot where she's looking at those guys in the background. So I think we're actually okay on this shot. Would like to punch up a little bit about it though. So let's pull up 289A and go from there. Tom says, I saw a similar critique on animation from Animator's Island the other day. Too much movement of the character during dialogue. Yeah, well that, if you want to talk about being flowy, that would be probably the cardinal sin. That sums it up quite nicely, actually. Is that, well, the example I gave critically here would be what you see a lot of times in game art. It's understandable what they do, because what happens is they're using, number one, they've got a big investment in mocap, okay? So they're invested in setting up actors with motion capture and then capturing their movements so that those movements can be crafted into loops that are then used in a 3D game. I expect that today the situation is probably a lot better than it was 5 years ago. Okay, but the basic problem is you're super invested in getting all that mocap. Well, you want to use this stuff, right? And so then what you would see in games is you see these situations where a character would not be, it would be like a background character, and instead of standing there like a real human being would do, the person would just be, I'm doing it right now and you guys can't see it, but it would be just like, it's almost like you're dancing in place. You know, you're just moving endlessly without ever stopping for no good reason. And I'm going, well, of course they're going to do that because you have to justify the cost you had into getting the mocap, right? So you have to use it, right? So, but that's really not good storytelling, and it's actually kind of creepy when you see it, you know. Not as creepy as some of the facial animation that tried to be realistic that we've seen over the last couple decades, which has gotten, especially the last couple years, has gotten way better. Like, I mean, we're getting to the point where, you know, if you want to do credible virtual people, you can pull it off nowadays, obviously. To which I say, well, why bother then? You might as well just have the actor. So really, to me, the use case is, okay, Maria. So the use case is situations where you've got to reproduce a known actor virtually in order to keep them safe, or continue to use their likeness after they're old and wrinkled, or whatever the reason is. You know, there are definitely use cases for virtual people. But generally, I would say that's been a pretty hit or miss proposition in terms of the products that we've seen. So anyway, what we're going to do here is open up 289A. And if anybody's like bumming because we're in Krita so much the last few days, it's just because the shots I have to fix up were done in Krita in the first place. And I'm enjoying it. For the most part, Krita's been behaving itself, and I've been able to get the job done. So I am seeing, though, that this actually might be a Tahoma shot, because I'm not seeing a 289A. So let's pop open Tahoma, and you guys will forgive me while I jump through my hoops and take the steps necessary to do what I have to do. But yeah, I'm pretty stoked about interviewing Ed Hooks, not just because it's cool to have somebody that's kind of out there in the animation space to interview, but just because I kind of like the guy. I mean, he seems like a fun and kind of a neat guy, you know. He seems like somebody that will be quite a lot of fun to talk to. So, open up the scenes folder, Tahoma, I command you. Virtual people like those 3D images of performers who passed away. Right. With 3D immersion metaverse, I'm sure that sort of 3D avatar will be crucial. Yeah, but I would say, I think I'm safe in guessing that You think about, let's go back to the economics question. If you think about it, it's kind of weird because I had a conversation with a client today about something completely unrelated to animation that kind of moved in the same direction. It had to do with email, but I think I'll share this because it's really an interesting thing that a lot of business people don't look at, because right now what you're seeing in the sort of the web dev space, which I have a fair number of clients, that I do web sites for and host their sites and maintain and blah, blah, blah. And our hosting costs basically doubled last week because we implemented the SSL layer, which, if you don't know what that is, it basically means that when you go to a website, you see a padlock by the URL, by the web address, instead of some sort of ominous warning that the site isn't secure, right? And hang on a second. I want to look at what Tom's weighing in with a lot of stuff here. 24-book humble bundle on Animation Act. Oh, okay, that's a good idea. Buy the bundle, man. Yeah, and I saw that, Maria. I don't know if I commented on it, but when you did the turnaround, so it's looking pretty good. It's looking pretty good. You're just doing your thing. Okay, so where is Tianara here? Let's see. Like I said, you guys will forgive me for making you sit through this stuff because there really is no shortcut for going in and looking and seeing what I've got. I do not see that shot. What number was that? 289A. So what I was saying is that I'll make this concise for you guys. The point in the security space. Okay, so today we were talking about email, not web servers. But the point is, in the security space, here's the brutal reality. It's one of those 80-20 things, which to me is really significant, which is this. If you have the firewall, and you've got the spam filtering, and you've got the encryption, you just kind of go down the list of all the things that sort of relate to being secure and not having some sort of scary experience. Okay, if all of those items are in order, okay, none of it matters if you do something stupid. So if you get an email that says that your Amazon account's been compromised, click here to go to Amazon and confirm your information and keep your Amazon account secure. If you click the link and don't realize that email is actually just a spoofed email that's not from Amazon at all of your security measures turned out not to have mattered at all. Whereas if you take the contrast of that, or the converse, which is that you never do something stupid, but yet you have very little security infrastructure in place, you'll very rarely have a problem. So it turns out that human error is the thing that the vast majority of the problems come from. Yes, it's true that there can be very sophisticated hackers that do all kinds of interesting things that aren't very nice. But usually when someone has a problem, it's actually because they just clicked the wrong thing. And so what you're seeing in the web space now is that instead of email basically being free, or maybe $10 a month or something for a quote-unquote professional email package, the cost of that has gone up at an order of magnitude or two. So in other words, if you want to convert to Office 365, you're going from $150 a year, let's say, to somewhere between $1,500 and $3,000. Why? Because the story that we're told is that it's really, it all maps to keeping you secure, basically. And I argue that that's probably not true. It's probably true because if you think about it, once the software and hardware infrastructure is in place with new technology, let's say, that is more secure, once the infrastructure is in place, it really doesn't cost any more to run it securely than to run it insecurely. It's still the same machines running 24/7, right? And Amar, you're right. It's human error that gets people in trouble. Okay, so what it turns out is that it's enormously more profitable to charge people, 10 bucks a month, let's say, per email box forever. Just like we were talking about the other day, Maria, with I think was it you? Maybe it was actually the client I was talking to about this, but where I guess it was my client who uses Photoshop for some things, and she was kind of dismayed when she went ahead and went to the cloud and found out now I have to pay for Photoshop forever, as opposed to just buying a copy at one point and then you're good, right? Until you want to upgrade. And I don't decry the business model, because frankly it is my business model. It's what I've been doing for decades. Is I charge clients a given fixed amount so they know what their costs are going to be, and I just take care of things. And then what I do is, on my side, sort of behind the curtain, I try to use technology and good practices to make it so that what I have to do to serve them is done as quickly as possible, so I don't actually have to work that hard for my pesos, right? That's been my approach, since way before it was, in vogue, actually. Many years before it was in vogue, but that's how I've always done it. Anyway, so how does this relate to animation? It's got to do with the whole idea of the things that we spend a lot of time on often turn out to be the unimportant things. They turn out to be things that actually didn't matter that much. In the animation space, good storytelling trumps good animation all day long. I would make that argument quite forcefully. So anyway, looks like 289-A is not showing up here. And is it possible this is a Blender? Gosh, I guess it's possible. Yeah, the fishing, right. Correct. And the thing, you guys, I'm totally with you with what you're saying here, and it's true. I'm seeing it increasingly that customers are absolutely willing to pay more if they know that you've got their back, if particularly more than anything, if they know they can reach you, so that the communication connection can happen. A lot of these companies like GoDaddy, like Network Solutions, their service infrastructure is almost a study in how to do it wrong. In terms of, they have a high percentage, I guarantee you, of really, really unsatisfied people, where they come away from whatever the service experience is really unsatisfied, really feeling like, man, what a crappy company. How do they treat people like this and stay in business, kind of thing. But the reality is they can. Not because they're necessarily abusive or bad, companies, although they might be. I mean, it's a whole nother discussion, but bear with me here, guys. I'm looking at, on the other screen, I guess I'm looking at Salt and Light Scene 289A to see which shot it was. The other thing interesting about talking to Ed, which we haven't talked verbally, it's been an email exchange, but is, how you feel when you find out companies coming over? You want to clean your house, right? Okay, so 29A is not, it's not a Blender. Let me check this. So I'm a little mystified here, friends. I'm mystified. 289B is right here, but not 289A. Maybe I just looked wrong. Let's just try this one more time. Sorry. Oh, there it is. Okay, I'm an idiot. Well, that's not news to you guys. Discovering that I'm an idiot is really not probably a big surprise. Okay. So all I really want to do on this shot gives me the opportunity to get the render settings in place. Yeah, because as I expected, these are wrong. So 289A. So I guess as I'm thinking about this, what are some of the potential applications? I mean, for me, the biggie is really just having your focus be squarely on storytelling as the most important thing. Yeah, okay. Just checking my render setting. So the opposite of that would be the example I kind of make fun of sometimes is the idea that has where somebody does like a 3D turnaround of a character or something. I mean, that is cool, and it is cool looking, but there's really nothing other than getting a job, maybe as a modeler, let's say. Other than that, there's nothing in the real world marketplace that has any use for that at all. It's utterly useless, right? And so, of course, with more and more sophisticated tools, we're always attracted to tools that allow us to do something that's really cool fairly easily without a lot of deep knowledge that we couldn't do before. And so what you get is, and the example I guess I've given in the past is the bullet time effect in the Matrix, where there's a window of time where somebody really does something cool and works really hard to create something cool. The bullet time effect. And then what happens is the software companies jump on coming up with some cool little tools that make it basically easy to do what was initially very hard to do when it was first done and first showed up. Because doing the bullet time effect is really hard. You have to set up cameras all around in an array, and you've got to time how they go off. There's a lot involved in doing the bullet time effect. And as I've said before, what happened is after the Matrix came out, of course, all the commercials, you have like Super Bowl commercials where you'd see the bullet time effect. Well, there's a very limited window of time where you can get away with that, right? So, because it gets old fast. So then the question you should be asking yourself is, well, okay, what is the stuff that stands the test of time? The bullet time effect is cool, but it doesn't stand the test of time. What stands the test of time is the fundamentals of acting, the fundamentals of framing a shot, for example, the rule of thirds. Those are the things that stand the test of time. In fact, my own cinematography improved the most. I had the biggest dramatic jump in improvement in my cinematography when I actually started locking the camera down and not moving the camera much and not using sort of an emotional reaction to how a shot is framed to decide how to frame it. Because I always had a tendency to frame shots too tight and have people sort of cut off, like the top of their heads cut off because it like feels dramatic or whatever. The reality is usually that does not look that good when you actually cut it into a show or a movie. And when I started, the other thing I did was I started using the CinemaScope aspect ratio on my films to where I'm shooting them in widescreen, but the way you shoot it in widescreen is you just basically cut off the top and the bottom of the screen. Well, what that forced me to do was actually frame shots wider so that a regular medium shot, for example, would actually fit in the frame. Because you got to remember the top and the bottom are being cut off. And the way with the hackware that I use on my cameras, you can see that in the viewfinder. So you can look through the viewfinder and you see the CineScope aspect ratio. You guys know what I mean by CineScope? And by the way, I'll just jump in here. I'm looking up here and thank you, Amar, for weighing in on that thing. I did not know that the bullet time thing first showed up elsewhere. I did not know that. And when you say the guy who's Ju Lu, Killer Bean, wasn't Killer Bean? That was a Hash Animation Master thing, wasn't it? Why am I remembering that? I'm seeming to remember that. Yeah, anamorphic. Yeah, but see, the thing is, Tom, and I actually had a whole, yeah, Jeff Lu, right? Yes, he was a big Hash guy, absolutely. Back in the late 90s, 98 or so. Yep, Jeff Lu, I remember him. Jeff Lu, Raf Anzavin, and then Victor Navone. Those were the three guys. And of course, Victor Navone got a job with Pixar. Raf Anzavin, he was a talented kid. I don't know what the heck he's doing nowadays. Unfortunately, his dad he used to work with his dad, Steve, and his dad died young. He had a massive heart attack, like a widowmaker or something. Now, I have no idea what Raf Anzevin's doing today. But yeah, Jeff Liu, Raf Anzevin, and Victor Navone were the three guys that emerged out of the hash animation master community and went on to better things, you might say. Back in the day. I have no idea what Jeff Liu's doing these days either. But anyhow, yeah, the thing about Cinescope is when you're shooting, what I was going to say is I did a whole blog post on this because I might be able to show this actually. Bear with me here, guys, for half a second. Let me see. Bear with me. I'm going to show you guys something somewhat cool-ish. Where is the... Oh, here we go. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm actually loading up my my most recent feature film. And I'm going to show you some things about that. So the deal with Cinescope is this. Back in the 50s when Cinescope was developed, and there were other technologies that competed with it. VistaVision, for example. I can't remember what the format was that the Clint Eastwood films that ended with The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, they were shot in widescreen, but that wasn't Cinescope. So the first movie in Cinescope was The Robe. So back then, when they came up with the format, they were trying to get people to go back to the theater because television was starting to happen. That's basically what went wrong for the film industry. Okay. And so there was a very, very limited number of anamorphic lenses in existence. So the studios would have to rent these anamorphic lenses. The anamorphic lens would be like if you had a lens on your camera that looks like a jar. It doesn't look like a lens. It looks like a jar in the sense that it's cylindrical. And so what it does is it squeezes. So when you look through the viewfinder, the picture seems to be squeezed narrow. Okay? So all the people look really, really tall and thin. Well, what you would do, film is an analog format. So when you would shoot anamorphic, you would shoot squeezed, but then the result would be that you would when you shoot squeezed, a couple of things then had to happen. Number one, because it's an analog format and you weren't limited by the sampling error of a pixel grid like you are with digital, you could ostensibly squeeze more visual information onto that piece of 35 millimeter film. And then if you stretched it wide again with a lens that reversed that when you projected it, it would still look good and sharp. The problem you have with anamorphic, and believe me, I tried it. So if you look at the movie that I just opened up here, this is I'll show you what it looks like on the screen here if my computer doesn't start bogging down on me. It's if we jump back over here, you can see that. So it's thinking. But actually I can show it here. So I tried shooting anamorphic at different times to test some things with anamorphic lenses because you can get them. But the thing about it is that you have to have the camera perfectly positioned so that the anamorphic squeeze doesn't happen in a way that's not quite predictable. Okay? And it might be because I'm streaming. I got a lot going on the computer right now. This is a whole movie. You know, so it seems to be bogging down a bit, unfortunately. But it's really error prone. Like it's really tough to do it right. Okay? And so it's one of the reasons why probably that your Cinescope films tended to use a lot of locked camera shots because not only did the camera maybe weigh 300 pounds, but also you really didn't want to move the camera around too much when you're using an anamorphic lens. Okay? So now it seems like it wants to be okay. but it still sure is thinking a lot. That's too bad. But anyway, the upshot of it is you can see as you're looking at this, you could say, well, was this, okay, and then it disappears. Why does everything have to like start not working just at the moment when you're trying to show somebody something? This is like the curse of my life. Everything works perfectly for months on end, and then the minute I try to show somebody something, things start breaking. This is my curse. This has always happened to me. Yeah, it will not respond correctly. It won't. I'm gonna kill it. I'm gonna actually use the task manager and kill it. If I wasn't trying to do other stuff right now, it would be fine. But unfortunately, we're gonna have to just kill it. So anyway, upshot is, if you're shooting digitally, there is no scenario where anamorphic makes sense. Why? Because if you shoot anamorphic, what you're doing effectively, let's just jump back here and turn on the grid. What you're doing when you shoot anamorphically with a camera is you're saying the resolution of the sensor on my camera is like this grid right here. There's a limited physical number of pixels, period. Film isn't like that. Film is a continuum of responding to light. It's an analog medium, so it's completely different. If you have a pixel grid and you shoot anamorphic, all you're doing is you're giving the computer and the camera the problem that when you stretch it wide again, it has to resolve individual pixels to more than, one pixel has to get resolved to more than one pixel. So you're dealing with a digital medium where you're limited by that grid. So the net result is you gain nothing in terms of resolution when you shoot anamorphic, versus if you want to shoot widescreen digitally, you just actually put a ping over your whole movie or your whole show. You put a ping over it that puts a black bar on the top and the bottom. And it turns out that actually this will be crystal clear. It'll be as sharp as it needs to be. And there is no way to actually use anamorphic in a way that makes sense, in the sense that you're not throwing data away. You are throwing data away when you add the black bars because you're cutting off all the pixels at the top and the bottom. But the whole idea that you can get more wide resolution in a digital format without introducing blur is completely mythical. If you look at the physics of it, it actually makes no sense at all. But it's amazing how many independent, budget filmmakers don't understand. And so sometimes every few years they'll get enamored of anamorphic, and they'll go, oh yeah, I'm gonna get anamorphic lenses, I'm gonna shoot widescreen. It's like, no, no, just put black bars on the top and the bottom, and you'll not only get way better performance out of your editor, because you don't have the computational problem of unsqueezing the video, but you'll also actually have sharper footage and all the rest. So interesting stuff to me. But okay, so on my other screen, I'm going ahead and reopening Vegas, and we'll just go back to Salt and Light. Sorry I couldn't show you that. Like I said, if I wasn't live streaming, I'm sure I could probably pull up that movie and demonstrate it a little better. Yeah, and that's a great point too, Tom. An anamorphic squeeze on your, anything you do with your eyes, you will get used to very, very quickly. So if everybody was wearing anamorphic glasses all the time, it would not take very long. They've tested that with glasses that force your vision to be upside down. I can't remember how long it takes, but it seems to me that it's like 7 days. But after 7 days, the people's eyes, their brain adapts, and if they take the glasses off, everything looks upside down. Isn't that crazy? But that's the plasticity of the brain at work. So I guess I'll quit fighting it and just get down to, this looks like this is just the background. And this is T-emerge. Okay, so what we've got to do here is just do a little bit of punch up on the on the drawing itself. I just want to give her a little bit more, essentially eye makeup. Just make her a little bit more feminine. So, you know, I find all these things definitely quite interesting. Getting back to it, you know, for the reason that I said when I was talking about email and spoofing and security, is that people, the misunderstanding that people have about anamorphic when you're talking digital is really a great example of how people, they get enamored of an idea and completely overlook the fact that that idea actually makes no sense at all. Now, will it look okay? Yeah, it'll look okay. You can shoot anamorphic if you want to, but you're going to really make your job enormously more difficult on many levels. Okay, so watch this. This is where we're going to use a new Krita feature from Krita 5. I'm going to go Control S, or I'm sorry, Control C. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go Shift Control V, which is not a native hotkey. I set that myself. But now I can actually paste that into the same layer, which if you use any other software, you're probably going, geez, that's crazy. Of course you can do that. Well, not really. Actually, that's kind of a new thing in Krita. Traditionally in Krita, you can only, anytime you cut and paste, you're actually creating a new layer. So now let's hit the B key. And okay, so we can see that I would call this a flaw in Krita. There's really no good reason why that distortion around the edges should be taking place. But there it is. So what we'll do is we'll hit the G key and sample the background color of the skin. And actually, I got to be careful here. This shot has a vignette on it, so this is something you want to be careful of. At least I see a layer called Vig. The change is very, very tiny from the vignette. So in this case, it probably doesn't matter. But you want to be careful, because if you have layers that are affecting your color, then when you sample the color, you're not actually sampling the color of her skin. If the vignette's turned on, you're sampling the color of her skin modulated by the vignette. And so then when you try to paste in some more color, you're actually going to wind up with a color that's just a little bit off from what you thought you were sampling. Makes sense. Now, in all reality, this, okay, I just did something stupid. Let me check this. Okay. Got to be in the right layer there, folks. What I was going to say is that probably this would never be noticeable in the show. It maybe would and maybe wouldn't. I'm not sure. Okay, so for this shot, I'm going to go ahead and, or this frame, I should say, this cell. I'm going to go ahead and just repaint it. No big deal. So this is what I've been kind of doing a little bit of today before I live streamed, is it's just grunt work of going through the next webisode and just finding things that just aren't quite where they need to be and getting them there. And I'm sure there'll be additional passes where I want to improve things even more. But okay, so here's where it makes sense, Dave. If the software can take image pixels from that part of the sensor that will not be used, where the black bars are, then you're benefiting from something. Boy, that's a great point. I would say kind of, sort of, because I would still argue not. Here's why. Let me show you explicitly why. Okay, if my sensor is taking this picture, but the picture that I'm taking has characters who are long and they're tall because the anamorphic lens is stretching them wide. Okay, where we're going to wind up when it's all said and done is we're going to have the black bars, and then this is going to be squished this way. It's not actually being squeezed from the outside, it's being squeezed down, right? So what you're doing, if you take a pixel, okay, let me just really make this explanation, because I want people to understand this. Okay, so here's a grid of pixels. You got 4 pixels. Now there's 1 of 2 scenarios that you're going to be going into. Okay, The two scenarios are that it's going to be squeezed down or it's going to be squeezed up. You're either going to make it smaller or you're going to make it larger. What I'm saying is you are introducing the same problem either way. Why? Well, because number one, if you have to stretch this to take up this space here, then what you've got to do is the software has to interpolate, well, is this what the software wants to draw is this. Because you're scaling from this rectangle to this rectangle. But the software cannot do that because it's got to relegate it to this 9 pixel grid. That's why I specifically didn't use an example that doubled the size. With doubling the size, you can get away with it. But if you're doing anything but a perfect, like an order, factor of 2, then the software has to decide, well, okay, I guess, what am I going to do? I'm going to make this pixel red, and I'm going to make this pixel probably pink. I'm going to probably make this pixel pink. I'm probably going to make this one pink. And the software's really got a problem because it's going to have to decide whether to make these ones that are in the middle pink or white. It's got to pick. It's got to choose one or the other. Okay, so there is no scenario where 4 pixels can be scaled up to 9 pixels in a way that doesn't introduce blur. Well, so somebody would say, well, yeah, you just shoot everything bigger and shrink it down. Actually, that's wrong. You have the same problem when you shrink something down. Okay, so if you shot this initially, okay, and again, let me correct that. I'm going to do this as 9 pixels to make it the illustration make more sense. If this was a 9 pixel grid, okay, and you say, well, okay, we're gonna shoot larger and then shrink it down and then it'll be sharper. Nope, still doesn't work. Because now you're taking the pixel of 9 and you've got, again, same situation. You have to resolve it to 4. Now it will be sharp, but it won't be accurate. Not like an analog medium would be, because it's going to have to, in this scenario, if it did a fairly dumb algorithm, this would actually probably be, what you'd probably wind up with is that this cell here would be pink, and this one would be pink, and actually you would lose crispness because there wouldn't be any pixels that resolve to red, because the percentage-wise, there's not enough of this area that's red to justify making red the choice. So it's probably going to choose pink. You see what I'm saying? It's a sampling error problem. And it does not matter if you shrink it or if you expand it. You actually have the same problem both ways. That's why I've talked about when somebody's creating art for, and they get confused about what DPI even means, because DPI has nothing to do with your software. DPI is a function of the output medium that it's going to be reproduced on, right? So in your scenario, you're right, Tom, that you probably will have a pretty crisp image shooting anamorphic in the vertical dimension, because you're actually going to cut out pixel information, but what you end up left with will be comparatively high contrast, because it's going to have to make bold decisions about what to throw away and what to keep. But on the horizontal dimension, and of course, when you're shooting anamorphic, by the way, just to be accurate, you are actually not doing what I just described. What you're doing is you're squeezing more information in terms of from east to west. You're squeezing more information onto the sensor is what you're doing. Therefore, the only way that resolves to a widescreen shot is that all of your horizontal pixel information will get blurred vis-a-vis the first example I gave, where it's got to spread those pixels. Well, okay, actually that's not true. What it's going to do is it's going to take the whole thing and not do anything with it in terms of width, and what it's going to do is squeeze it. Well, no, wait, I'm having a dyslexia moment. That's actually wrong too. If you shoot anamorphic, what you're doing is you're taking the anamorphic picture and you are, I guess, yeah, you're squunching it down. So you're going to gain a little bit of sharpness this way. Okay, in the vertical dimension, you will gain a little bit of sharpness probably, but only because of the throwing out of good information. Okay, so you don't gain anything in terms of real resolution. When you just use black bars, what are you doing? Well, when you just use black bars, you're throwing away this whole area up here. You're throwing away. You're saying I'm just not going to be included in my picture. So it's gone forever because it's just not useful to the picture you're taking. However, in terms of the sensor and the digital grid, you're going to wind up with an exact 1-to-1 ratio between the pixels that you're taking a picture of and the pixels you reproduce in your final output. That means that the imagery you shoot, yeah, you're throwing this away, but your actual image will be as sharp as possible. It'll be perfect. Right? But yeah, see what I'm saying, Tom, is you're taking a wide image. You're not taking a wide image. Wide in the sense that you're gathering more pixels from the east and the west onto the sensor. But now what you actually have on the sensor and on the camera is a perfectly sharp squeezed image. So then the way you go to a widescreen format from that is only to squeeze it vertically, squeeze it down vertically. So does it basically still look okay most of the time? Yes, it does. It does. But again, you have a really big, powerful performance penalty for making the computer in real time in your video editing software compute the squeeze. Okay, so now that is all mitigated enormously, actually, by shooting 4K. If you shoot 4K, all bets are off because you're gonna. I mean, what you can do with 4K is amazing. You know, because you've got. Well, what is it? 16 times as many pixels? I mean, it's, you know. But since the mechanical sensor can be wide, I assume then can capture 1-to-1 with a widescreen sensor. Well, there is no such thing. There's no such thing as, at least to my knowledge, there's 4K sensors. So the answer to getting the quality as good as it can be in the digital domain, shooting digitally, which is definitely, 5 orders of magnitude cheaper than shooting film, the answer absolutely is to shoot 4K. But there really is no such thing as a widescreen sensor in common use that I'm aware of. All sensors are HD aspect ratio. And typically nowadays they're either... There's some in between with cameras that shoot RAW and stuff like RED cameras and stuff like that. But basically the sensors are either HD or 4K. That's pretty much what you get. So this may be enormously boring to most of you guys. I don't know. But getting back to work here. But I mean, I went through it because I wanted to shoot widescreen. I wanted that cinematic cinescope look in my, what was it, my fourth film? I think it was my fourth film. And then every other film I made after that was shot in widescreen. I just like it better, It just looks more like a movie to me. Oh, brother. I wonder if this is just a reversal of what we had before. I bet you it is. Yep. So we're going to take this frame and just drag it over to here. And then, boop. Okay, cool. Okay, maybe, I'll tell you what I'm thinking here. I think, I'm looking at my video edit on the other screen, but I'm actually thinking I'd like to give a little hint of the hair. Wouldn't we like to see just a little smidgen of her hair there? Yeah, definitely. Okay, so this will be a bit more work. We should put this on another layer. We're going to give ourselves lots of grief. So if we do it this way, we can just animate the darn thing and only have to do it once. So what I'm going to do is go over here and sample her hair color, go back here, and I'm just going to draw a shape. Just kind of sort of make it work. That looks a little artificial. Okay, let's give that a crack. Okay, and you know what? Since we're using Krita, let's go ahead and use a transform mask so that if I decide I want to change the hair, I can do it one time on this first frame, and I don't have to worry about reproducing it multiple times. So I'm going to add a transform mask, and then my normal practice is just on the first frame, just put a keyframe. Then all the other keyframe animation will be done here through the timeline. Okay, and so what we're going to do is hit the A key and just transform this. And it's a little clunky to kind of put this down here and have to dial it into position, but probably the cost of doing that is less than the cost of trying to reproduce the way the hair looks, you know, over and over and expect it to look the same. In fact, I would probably, actually what I'm going to do here, I'm going to go back here and I'm going to move the center point to right here at the tip. Okay, that's interesting. That caused that one to change. So that's, I guess that's not too surprising. But yeah. So there's some people who may say that there's a certain aesthetic benefit to just you know, drawing it repeatedly, but I tend not to favor that approach. So it wouldn't be wrong to do it that way, though, of course. So what I'm doing, and the reason I set the center there is so I could just kind of cover up this little junction point right there and expect that probably then I can just do a simple rotation and it'll probably just fall into place. Yeah, it looks like for the most part that is the case. So again, same thing here. I just have to line it up right there with that little, where the two ink lines kind of meet. Like that, and I think I got it. I'm going to save my work. 16 by 9. It takes 4K 16 by 9 to make full HD ultra wide screen. Yeah, I mean 4K is just amazing. I mean if you were producing for television, you could well, and I guess I shouldn't have said television. I should have said standard definition. Like back in the old days, if you were like really ahead of the curve on getting your hands on some 4K technology, then you could literally shoot a very complex situation in 4K and then just use cropping to actually assemble a reasonably good edit of it. People actually do it all the time on YouTube channels where they have a wide shot of their they might be having a dialogue with somebody or an interview or something, and if you position the people in their chairs so they're sitting, so they're sort of angled correctly, you can shoot the whole thing wide with 4K, but then judiciously in the editing step, go ahead and crop into close-ups on each of the people, and it actually works, even though you've only got one camera looking straight at the two of them. Right? So, all for the pursuit of, you know, a certain look, I guess. Well, you guys can see the problem, huh? Well, the problem is, here, the biggest problem is we need to delete the hair right there. But no, the other thing is these need to be hold keys, and I have to look at where the heck, I don't know if I've done this. I think what we can do here let's go ahead and we'll learn a little bit about Krita's animation curves. If we go in here, you know, as one might expect, we basically have 3 parameters. Rotation. It's a little strange. Well, I guess we changed the position and we changed the rotation. So what Krita is kind of weak on is being able to treat animation keys as a group. Let's see what we can do here. If we go here, I don't think there's a way to lasso these, unfortunately. So if we grab this, and where the heck is it? Is this hold? Yeah, hold constant. Okay, I see what's going on. So we want to make this hold constant. And this is the bad news with Krita, is you really do need to do this one at a time. So is that a tragedy? Well, it depends on your opinion. At the end of the day, you know, what did that take, 1 minute? So I guess it's probably not that big of a deal, but it would be nice to be able to lasso all those keys. Now let's see if this is correct now. Now it's still crawling around here. So that looks right and this looks wrong. So I presume I need to do this with these keys, and now we're running into another bit of bugginess where I cannot grab them. Oh, and that's not good. That right there is not good, because I'll bet you that's not undoable. I'm going to hit undo. Yeah, that's what I was afraid of. So this shows you how immature and problematic the keyframe editing in Krita is. It's really not even, it's not even close to being, you know, anything you'd call professional or reliable or anything of the kind. I mean, this is like 1988 quality, you know, interface and editing. It's pretty much as bad as it gets, because the only way I can fix that actually is to delete the keyframe entirely, which of course is ridiculous, right? So what we're trying to do here is get this key to be a hold interpolation. Well, what are we actually looking at? If we look at what's going on here, it looks to me like it is not moving, it is only rotating, right? Okay. Well, what's rotating? We've got a blue, a green, and a red. Red purports to be for position, so it's not the red one. We've got position X and Y, so it would appear that it's rotation Z. So the one thing that I didn't change to hold interpolation is in fact the thing that I need to change to hold interpolation. Let's do it this way. Let's start turning these off one by one. It's really a pain that you have to do this, but at this point, as far as I know, you do. There is no way to do this without going in and you can see there is a little bit of a change there. So let's just try it and see if it fixes it. We kind of just crossed the threshold door there, where the cost of dicking around with doing it this way is much greater than the cost of having just set individual keyframes manually the whole, you know, from the start. So, but you can see one of the problems Krita's interface has is that when the other animatable parameters are even visible at all, it does not, they have not built enough sophistication in the software for the software to know what parameter you're trying to click on. And their solution for that is that nothing is selected. I mean, you guys saw that happen a minute ago. So that's pretty bad. So other than this anomaly right there, other than that anomaly, we're good. So now what we need to do is find the parameter that has the anomaly in it. Well, look at the bright side. Back in the old days, we had to do this kind of stuff all the time with keyframe animation data. But I'm guessing It's well, scale? Well, okay, I would say it might be this one because I never set any scale keyframes. So, okay, so another problem here would be that when we grab these keyframes, let's see if we hit shift and see if we can, okay, we can select multiple keys, but you cannot hit delete and delete them. You actually have to use the interface like that. So I think that might have fixed it. And now, unfortunately, it appears okay, so that's interesting. So getting rid of the scaling keys literally got rid of all animation data completely, practically speaking, because what that means is there's an unknown value associated. Oh wait, and then now all of a sudden out of nowhere it showed up again. Okay, that's weird, people. That's a little scary weird. Yeah, okay, it's pretty weird, but it worked. That is a little freaky, folks. So you're glad I said it? Yeah, well, it is true. I mean, in this case, the solution would not have been to draw it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times, and the solution would have not been to use the transform mask. The correct solution would have been to draw it once and then just manually move it into the right position on each of those additional keys. The reason I didn't do that, though, is this. The way I did it, now, if I go in here and paint into her hair, which is, I'll turn off the transform mask for the moment, but the reason to use the transform mask, this is actually a strong reason to use it, is that now I can really dial in her hair, you know, to make it look exactly the way I want it to. Whatever. And in point of fact, what I really want to do is probably actually clamp it out a little bit here. Okay. And now the change that I'm making right here will propagate across all the animation. If I used individual keyframes to just move the drawing of the hair, bop, 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 just add keyframes, then I would have to actually make the change that I'm making right now every single time, and I would have to do it the same way every time, which is impossible. Nobody would ever manage that. So now, doing it this way, watch the magic happen, friends. And Creed is thinking. But see, as you can see, I only had to change it in one time, one place. So that is a good thing. I mean, that's definitely probably one of the key benefits to the transform mask tool. Now, having gotten it right, is it tempting to go ahead and bake it down? Yes, with this caveat. This is what I strongly recommend to anybody that's using Krita. If you get in a situation like this, don't just bake it down, because once I bake it down, I am going to have 5 individual animation keys. And then what if I need to fix something in the hair later? So the thing to do is, and for whatever reason, it performs a little better if you turn the layer off first, like that. Then duplicate it. As you can see, it's the duplicate also has a copy of the transform mask. And as far as I can recall, if I now turn this into a flattened layer, the hair will disappear. And the reason is that it will bake in the fact that the layer is turned off. I know that sounds like crazy dumb, but let's go ahead and try it, because I might be wrong, but I'm pretty sure if I flatten this, the hair will disappear. So let's find out. Okay, and actually what's really happening is it doesn't want to flatten it at all if it's turned off. So there you go. So what you got to do is turn it back on and flatten the layer. And now what we'll have in a moment is the hair baked in, but we'll still have the transform mask version that's still there and just you know, being kept as a kind of a backup in case we needed to get back to it. So there you go. So there's the hair. Turn that off. Now, as you can see, what did Krita do? It put an animation keyframe on every single one of these frames. Now, that's a little bit silly. I don't know if you guys know this, but, and I'm sorry, I'm chewing one of my olives right now. One thing that you may not realize that you can do in Krita is that you can render an image sequence, and if you click only unique frames, it will actually only render to the image sequence the images that have actually changed and not the ones in between. As I recall, the numbering of those images still respects the timeline. So, in other words, if nothing changed on these 4 frames, they would not be rendered. And I believe this one would still be numbered 5. Well, actually 4, since we're starting at 0, but okay. And that's useful because then you can drag those into Tahoma and work out the timing in Tahoma if you want to. So it's just something to think about. But the other thing here is, because we used hold interpolation on the transform mask, what we have is we've got a bunch of frames where nothing actually changed. And the reason I brought up the thing about rendering is I kind of wish that the baking of the transform mask was the same way, where it only creates a keyframe on frames that actually have changed. That would be useful. But, to be fair, not a big deal. You can just go in here and cut them back out if you want to. So there we go. We need an eye blink too. Yeah, I don't know about getting, as far as extracting images from an MP4. Oh, you mean render a subset of images to MP4? Because of course you can render to MP4 from Krita. But I don't think that works. If you go to video, and that might not be what you meant, but if you go to video, you do not have the ability to only render the unique frames. It's only an option that's available when you're doing an image sequence. And by the way, I will tell you, that actually is kind of insane if you think about it, because I know that under the hood, when you use FFmpeg to render an MPEG-4 video, I happen to know that under the hood, Krita actually renders the image sequence first and then uses FFmpeg to just compile it into an MP4. Therefore, there really is no reason that only unique frames should not work when you're rendering an MP4. So yeah, your question, okay, so that's what I thought you were getting at. So the question is, can you import an MP4? It says import video animation. I've never used that option. I've imported animation frames a zillion times, but let's take a look at it. Choose a video file. So let's go to, we'll kind of keep this simple and we'll go to clerical errors, raw images. Oh wait, they're not going to be MP4s. Those are going to be MOVs. QuickTimes. So, I'm thinking about back in the day when I was rendering to MP4 more often, because I haven't done it in a long time, so I'm just thinking on the top of my head here where there might be some MP4s laying around. Okay, there's one. Well, there you go. I mean, if it's using FFmpeg under the hood, there's no reason it shouldn't work quite well. So yeah, that's cool, Tom. You can actually preview the video. And whether this is a feature in Krita 4 series or if this is new to 5, I'm not sure. I think it's new to 5 though, but it looks like you can do it. So skip interval, that's interesting. Start at 0 seconds, duration is 4 seconds. Let's just see what happens. See what it does. Not bad. That's pretty freaking fast, too. Wow. That's impressive. That is impressive. What I'm seeing here tells me something I did not realize, though, which is that my Tianara shot is at full HD. I thought it was, I just was assuming it was broadcast HD, but it's not. It looks like it's full HD. And so now when I play it back at 8 frames per second, so there you go, buddy. Looks like that's a viable pathway for you. Paint layer, and we will actually just hit the trash can. So yeah, there you go. You can do it. Nice. What was kind of interesting about that was it had the option to skip frames, so you could kind of you could convert an MP4. I mean, there's way easier ways to do it, but you know, you could convert something into a speed paint by only taking every 20th frame or something, I suppose. The way I do that is I use an FFmpeg batch file I created that will take an MP4 and convert it into an 8 times speed paint or 16 times. So if anybody's interested in that, that is something I can share. I'll just share it right here in half a second. So that's what I use, actually. FFmpeg-I, which is input. And then what I do is, like whatever comes out of OBS, I'll just change the name of it to input.mp4. And then filter the video. And it's got this stuff, set PTS equals 0.16 times PTS. And that's all in quotes. And the output's going to be speedpaint 8x.mp4. And then what that does is it takes any mp4 and turns it into an 8 times speedpaint. And then it's just a little different command line to turn it into a 16x speedpaint. But I mean, this is a good example that kind of bridges the gap between artistry and code, and it's probably one of the reasons why I like programming as much as I, like other things like art or music or whatever. And, mastering FFmpeg's command line is not a bad idea because there's a lot of problems that you can solve with FFmpeg. Oh, you copied it. Oh, good man. Good man. But yeah, if you hit me up in Discord or whatever too, if you want me to, I can send you the other. Because one of the more interesting things about FFmpeg that most people probably would not bump into, but might be interesting is, let me see what I have here. I would have to find it, but I do have the exact code that would, for example, allow you to look at a folder full of video files and do a batch conversion of them all in a single operation. And the syntax for that is fairly exacting, but once you get the batch file set up, then it's going to look at all the files in the folder that match the filter, like star.mp4 for example or whatever, and it's going to go ahead and process them all in the same way. So the catch with that you got to be careful of is you're using the Windows DOS file name substitution. And the file name substitution in DOS batch files is a parenthesis, excuse me, a parenthesis followed by a variable name, and it does basically a search and replace type, replacing of that variable with the file names. And that becomes important because you're usually going to add some sort of suffix or something to the file name so that when you do the processing, you're not overwriting the same file over and over and over. Each of them is going to have a unique name, so you have to take the name of the original file and then modify it in some way, like, I'm sure that makes sense to you. I think, Tom, you know what I'm talking about. So anyway, I guess we do need to render this son of a gun. This was 289A. That's right. Boom, baby. Now we'll cut her into the show. Aren't we having fun tonight? And what time is it? Man, it's 9 o'clock. Hang on a second, I'm going to check something. I'm thinking I'm going to jump over here. I think I'm going to probably wrap up. Not really up for starting a new shot, but I did say I wanted to add an eye blink, didn't I? Okay, let's do that. So she's going to come down. Boom, right there. So here's Tia merged. All we got to do for the eye blink is, and I think we can get away with ignoring the vignette on this particular shot. So what we're going to do is sample that color, take the G key, and just... okay, that was stupid. I just did that on the wrong layer. Quintessential Krita mistake, finding out you're working in the wrong layer. Okay, B key. So what you want to do is you want to cover up the eye and then go back to the previous keyframe and just drag a copy over like that. And now you have added your eye blink. It's easy peasy. Okay, Krita, I really don't want you to loop. Thank you very much. And why is... oh, okay. Hang on a second here, folks. Because I imported that video, our length is all wrong. So it's 40 frames. Okay, sorry. So we got to go here and change this back. Curse you, Red Baron. That means that the one I just rendered has a bunch of erroneous files in the folder. Okay, and then let's do the same thing here. Let's boom, right there. You can get a lot of mileage, friends, out of eye blinks. Yes, you can. And the stupid curve interpolation, I tell you, what possessed the Krita developers to make the default interpolation for this tool curve baffles me. I've said repeatedly that I've never once ever needed curve interpolation, which is basically smoothing on the freehand path tool, but that's no longer true. I can confess at this point in history there has been precisely in the last 2 years one time. There was in fact one time where curve interpolation actually was useful and made sense. So, go figure. It was bound to happen sooner or later. But you can still see all these anomalies. Let me hit the G key and just clean this up a little bit. Stuff you don't realize is messing up your imagery. Okay. So now I've actually introduced a bit of a problem. Yep. Here's what we do. Here, because see what I did? See what a goof I am? I just fixed up this eyebrow a little bit, but the problem is it's not the same in the previous frame. So here's how we fix that. That's easy. We just select the eyebrows, do the same thing we did earlier. Oh, I blew it. I blew the selection. Be careful. Let's do it over. Let's not get sloppy here. Okay. Control C. And now if I go back here, Control Shift V. All right. B key. And I actually still have the problem that I just pointed out, but that's all right. We'll just go like this. Yeah. And then what we'll do is grab this frame and pop it up there, a copy. So now, see, like right there, that's a Krita-ism that just drives me nuts. I didn't hit shift Why did Krita decide for me that, oh, you must want to create a selection here? Why does it do that? It's like so dumb. Well, it's not dumb. It's just there's a lot of features of the software that it's clear that they never tested before they released it. So, what are you gonna do? Yes, or an output folder for the results. That's true, Tom. Yeah, if you're doing a batch operation. Okay, let's jump back here and see what we've got. Do. Oh my goodness, looky here. We actually did not even get to see the eye blink. Well, by gum, I'm going to change the length of the edit just to accommodate that freaking eye blink. I don't care what anyone says. And in fact, I'm going to stretch it even a little bit more. So there. Yes. Man, eye blinks are so important. They're so cheap. You know, they're so economical to do, and yet they add so much life to a performance. And you can do it the way I do. You know, I just do it by feel. You know, I just kind of run along and I go, it just feels like a blink should go there. Usually it's about right. Hugely important. Okay, so we're going to wrap it up. I'm going to recap what I said at the beginning of the live stream today, which is that I do plan to do an interview with Ed Hooks sometime soon. Okay, so if you weren't here at the beginning and you don't know what the heck I'm talking about, let's just go to edhooks.com and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Come on, Ed. Where are you, my friend? Here we go.
Hello, I'm Ed Hooks, acting for animators. Welcome, I'm your acting teacher. Scroll down and explore the ways that we can work together.
Okay, so Ed Hooks, here you got a review by Brad Bird of his book. By looking outside the medium, Mr. Hooks has made a valuable contribution toward deepening our understanding of it. So that's pretty, glowing comment from Brad Bird, the director of The Incredibles. And so Ed wrote this book, and he does these master classes all over the world. He actually lives in Portugal, but Ed has a book called Acting for Animators that you can get on Amazon or whatever. And so anyway, Ed and I have been kind of having an email exchange for the last few days, and kind of hit it off. And he's agreed to sometime soon come on and do a live interview and kind of talk about. Just give some tips, I think, regarding acting and how a good understanding of what you're trying to achieve with acting will maybe help you to become a better animator faster, by really focusing on acting and storytelling, from my pragmatic perspective, being much more important than, making things move around a lot. It's obviously movement's important, but this is what Ed does, and I think it'll be fun to bring him on and have a conversation sometime soon. So that is on the agenda. We just have to kind of find a time for it. So it should be good. And with that, my friends, I have gotten a lot done today, actually, on the show. I have punched up or fixed about 7 shots today. So at this point, look at where we're at here, folks. We are about just little, not quite 3/5 of the way, but we're more than halfway through fixing up webisode 4. So it's not going to be long before we're going to be able to get the 4th webisode of Salt and Light out. So that's pretty cool. And so if there's any last minute questions, I will be happy to answer them. And otherwise, I'm going to be signing off. So I'll give you guys about 10-15 seconds to weigh in with any questions, comments, whatever, if you have them. And if nothing happens, we'll just call it a night. Inio-san, nice, very nice. Thank you, Dave. Okay, great. Hey, hello, Inio-san. I didn't notice you were here, so good to see ya. Amar, have a good night. I guess we're done. So as you guys know, there will be more. Yeah, and I don't know when it's going to be, Neo-San, at this point. We've been basically going back and forth with emails the last 2 days, and we've just found we have a lot in common in terms of our philosophy about acting and stuff. And, it just kind of clicked. He seems like a really neat guy. And so, yeah. Okay, gotcha. All right, cool. So, all right, good night, people, and there will be more.